I built his life. I deserve his fortune." Those words rang in my ears as I sat alone in the courthouse parking lot, hands locked around the steering wheel like it was the only thing still mine. My name is Alan Morrison. I'm 49, and I had just watched my wife of 23 years tell a judge she was owed $14 million of my money, half of my construction company, and the lake house my grandfather raised, board by board, with his own hands. Victoria always did have a way with words. You could dress a lie in one of her sentences, and it would pass for Sunday best. Back in college, she could talk a bouncer into letting 5 of us in for the price of 2 and make him thank her for the privilege. She was studying journalism then, bright and fast and certain, while I was a broke kid from Billings, working 3 jobs and keeping a wrench in my backpack because I never knew which machine would die next. She said she loved my grit. I believed her. For a long time, I believed every word she laid down like stepping stones across a river. If I'm honest, I'd felt this coming, the way a man feels the weather change in his knee before the clouds show it. She'd started asking questions that didn't match normal curiosity. Where precisely was the company cash parked during transitions? Why exactly did our insurance writer exclude the lake property, and who specifically had set that up? She updated the passwords on the household accounts, moved bills into paperless delivery, and began scheduling lunches with old friends I somehow never met. 2 weeks before the petition hit my doorstep, I caught her rifling the drawer in my office where I keep deeds and titles. "Looking for stamps," she said, without glancing up. "We keep stamps in a blue dish by the kitchen phone and have for 11 years. When I reminded her, she smiled the way a cat smiles at a bird feeder. That night, I told myself to stop being suspicious, that marriages go through seasons, that she was simply anxious about money like everybody else. The next morning I called George Brennan, my attorney for business matters since Morrison Construction was 3 guys and a borrowed skid loader. George knows contracts, and he knows people. And after he heard me out, he said in that measured way of his, "Alan, when divorces look this tidy, it's because someone's been planning them a long time." I didn't see the affair then. I saw busy restaurants and vague calendar invites, and the curiosity of a wife who'd always preferred menus to balance sheets, suddenly leafing through amortization tables like they were ads for a fall sale. What I didn't see was Kyle. It still tastes bitter when I say his name. Kyle Brennan, George's younger brother, who came in as a partner when we began bidding on larger jobs that required stamped architectural work. A talented designer, charming without trying, good with clients, and good with a pen. For 12 years I trusted him with numbers I never showed anybody outside the family. Turns out I should have included him in that definition all along, because that's where the rot started, inside a circle I thought was closed. The petition was delivered on a Tuesday morning by a process server who looked like he wished he were anywhere else. "I'm sorry," he said, as if the paper itself carried a contagion. I read it standing at the kitchen island, my coffee going cold, while each paragraph took another slice off my life. The ask wasn't half of everything the way television scripts it. It was surgical. 14 million in cash and assets, enumerated by account and parcel. 50% of Morrison Construction, including all subsidiaries and intellectual property, named Point by Point. The lake house and 40 acres in Flathead, described by meets and bounds. $15,000 a month for 10 years in support. The right to use my last name as a trademark for an interior design practice. The precision told a story. This wasn't a reaction to an argument or a last-minute decision at a friend's kitchen table. This was a campaign. I drove to the lake that afternoon. February light throws a clean, hard truth across water, and I needed that. My grandfather built that dock when he was 20, with a hammer he made in his high school shop class. I sat where he always sat to watch weather build over the Swan Range and let the cold bite me into thinking clearly. Victoria never understood why this place mattered. To her, it was a valuable tract. To me, it was proof that a man can leave more than bills when he dies. I called George from the end of the dock and told him everything. He told me to freeze joint access where I legally could, say nothing to Victoria directly, and hire a private investigator he trusted for financial work, a former detective named Patricia Hayes. I hired her before I drove back to town. The next 3 days were quiet in the way only bad weather is quiet. Then the newspaper ran a little item no bigger than a business card. Prominent builder served with restraining order. Victoria alleged I'd followed her to her apartment, threatened her in texts, showed up at a restaurant, and made a scene. It was nonsense I could prove was nonsense, but restraining orders are fast and sticky. They stick to reputations, to bank committees, to school fund boards and country club whispers. 2 potential clients postponed meetings until things settle. The bank asked for additional documentation on a line they'd already approved. My phone buzzed and buzzed with messages that said, in a dozen polite ways, "Are you a man we should worry about?" That's when the anger settled into something colder and more useful. Not rage focus, a line of steel that ran from the base of my skull to the bones in my hands. Patricia called on the 10th day. Her voice is the kind that belongs to somebody who's seen worse and knows what to do with it. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "your wife has been preparing this for at least 18 months. I have billing records from 3 divorce attorneys, 2 investigators, and a forensic accountant she hired out of Missoula to review hypothetical business valuations. I also have copies of retail receipts for 2 different digital recorders and a transcription service." My mouth went dry. "Recorders?" "Yes, sir. She's been recording conversations with you for months. Phone calls, dinner discussions, anything where money or the company came up. Montana is a one-party consent state. If she's in the conversation, it's admissible." I sat down at my desk because my legs stopped behaving like legs. "Is there more?" "I'm afraid so. Your wife has been meeting regularly with a man who appears to be providing inside information about your operations. His name is Kyle Brennan. The first time you realize you're looking at a picture of betrayal, your brain doesn't register the faces. It registers the angles. The way 2 heads tip toward each other when secrets are exchanged. The way a hand rests too easily on the back of a chair. The kind of smile that starts in the eyes. Patricia had photos. She had timestamps, mileage logs, credit card receipts. She had hotel charges. She had a story that fit the missing pieces. I called George. There was silence at first, then a ragged exhale that sounded like loss. "Kyle is my brother," he said. "Yes," I said, "and he's also a man who sat at my table and listened to me talk about my parents' wills, my inheritance, and what the lake means to me." "What do you want to do?" George asked. "I want to win," I said. "Not scorch the earth just to feel heat. Not throw punches to see them land. I want to protect what I built and make sure they can't use what they stole. And I want to do it without turning into the man that headline is trying to make me." He was quiet for a moment, then businesslike. "Then we do it methodically." The irony is that the weapon they chose, paper, was always going to be the one I defended against best. After my parents died, I restructured the company because grief makes you understand how fragile inheritance can be. With a corporate attorney out of Denver, I set up Morrison Holdings, a parent LLC that owns the land our yards sit on, the buildings, the heavy equipment, and the brand. Morrison Construction, the operating company everyone sees on trucks and job site banners, rents those assets and earns revenue from contracts. My personal shares in the operating company are just that, shares in a business that owns very little directly. Above the holding company sits the Morrison Family Trust, funded with my inheritance and designed to keep the lake property from ever leaving the bloodline. The trust has a spendthrift clause and a narrow list of permitted transfers. If you aren't a Morrison by blood, you can visit and you can fish, but you can't own. I didn't do any of it to cut Victoria out. I did it because I've seen divorces shatter businesses that fed dozens of families. I made sure mine couldn't be splintered because two people broke. When the hearing arrived, Victoria came dressed like grief, black dress, pearls like little tears. Her lawyer theatrical, cufflinks that flashed on purpose, spoke about sacrifice and support, and the unseen labor of wives who build empires by making dinners and smoothing edges. There's truth in that, even when it's being used to pry open a safe that doesn't belong to you. When Judge Harrison asked whether I disputed the terms, George looked at me, and I said the line we practiced until it tasted like water. No, Your Honor. I agree to all of them. The room shifted in that small way rooms do when a surprise walks in. Victoria lifted her chin a fraction, smiled without smiling, and I knew she was already spending the lake in her head. Harrison signed the decree, listed the compliance deadlines, and set down his pen. I asked to submit additional documents for the court's record. He nodded. The bailiff carried a manila folder to the bench. Inside were corporate diagrams and stamped filings that showed the tree of ownership. Trust documents with dates 18 months older than Victoria's first consult. Patricia's photos and logs. And a copy of the partnership agreement Kyle signed when he joined us, with a highlighted clause about fiduciary duty and reputational harm. It took 10 minutes for the judge to read enough to understand. Mr. Morrison, he said, looking over his glasses, it appears that some of the assets awarded to your wife are not directly owned by you, nor by the operating company. That's correct, Your Honor. I'm prepared to honor the spirit of your order. I have a revised proposal. I turned to Victoria. $2 million, paid within 30 days, and a mutual release. You walk away from everything else. If you decline, you'll spend the next 5 years trying to pierce a trust designed by people who do nothing but build these walls for a living. You'll appeal, you'll depose, you'll subpoena, and at the end, you'll have attorney's fees and a story. Or you can take the money, keep your dignity, and go make the life you say you're owed. For the first time in 2 years of preparation, she looked unprepared. Her attorney asked for a recess. When they returned, the theater was gone from his voice. They accepted. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I signed where I was told, watched the ink dry, and returned to my truck with the same hands I'd carried in. The next thing I did was deliver a notice to Kyle. Our partnership agreement has a buyout provision if a partner breaches fiduciary duties or harms the company's reputation. Sharing confidential operational data with a third party who intends to use it in litigation qualifies. Book value of his share, less offsets for damages we could document in delayed contracts, and bank friction, came to $87,000 and change. He took it because there wasn't anything else to take. George was grim through it, a man watching a bridge he once drove burn from both ends. Kyle moved to Arizona, then to silence. Businesses don't magically recover because a judge bangs a gavel, but they do breathe easier without hands around their throat. We landed a school project in Missoula, a hospital addition in Bozeman, and a warehouse park on the edge of town that will keep 40 guys in work trucks for 2 winters. The bank meetings stopped feeling like interrogations. People I've worked with, since I had more blister than callus, put their hands on my shoulder and said things like, "Glad to see you standing up straight, Al." The lake stayed the lake, cold in spring, forgiving in August, blue as a story you tell your son about the men who came before him, even if you never had that son. I stopped wearing my ring because rings mean promises, and I'm old enough now to make only the ones I intend to keep. 3 months later, I met Patricia for a cup of coffee to settle her final invoice. "You played that well," she said. "You didn't burn her down, but you didn't leave the doors unlocked either." "I don't want a trophy case," I said. "I want a life." She told me off the record that one of Victoria's recordings captured a moment I'd forgotten. Me telling her, after my mother's funeral, that I wanted to put the lake in a trust so nobody could ever sell it. In the recording, I said, "It's not about you, it's about history." Victoria replied, "History doesn't pay the bills." Patricia tapped the paper cup lid with her nail. "Sometimes, Mr. Morrison, history pays in other currencies." There were ripples I didn't expect. A month after the decree, a young engineer on my team asked to speak privately. He told me his parents were divorcing and asked what he should protect. I told him to protect his mother's dignity and his father's health and his own sleep. And if he built anything worth keeping, put the title where feelings couldn't move it. George and I sat on my porch one evening with 2 bourbons and more quiet than talk. He told me he'd resigned from any legal matter where his family touched my business. Conflict and conscience don't mix. We talked about brothers and about the strange math of loyalty. Neither of us found an answer worth carving into wood. As for Victoria, I know some things because small cities talk. She moved to Seattle, rented a storefront in a nice neighborhood, and opened an interior design studio with white walls and rattan chairs and a wall of mood boards. She posted pictures of cafes and staircases and vases that look like vases cost more than vases should cost. 6 months later, the lease was available again. The last photo had a caption about fresh starts, not always being straight lines. I didn't feel joy when I heard. I felt tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep. When a woman spends 2 years turning a marriage into a case file, she doesn't just hurt the man across the table. She hurts the part of herself that knew how to believe. If you're listening to this because you're standing at your own kitchen island with papers that make your name look like a stranger's, here's what I learned. Plan in peace for the storms that come when you aren't looking. Put the assets of your work inside structures that outlive arguments. Assume that anyone can disappoint you and design your life so that when they do, the damage is measured in dollars, not in the demolition of everything you've built. And if you're tempted to treat marriage like a contract, you can renegotiate with leverage and recordings and ambushes. Don't. You can win a battle in court and still lose the part of you that knows how to love without checking receipts. I drove to the lake last weekend with a thermos and a tape measure because wood moves with seasons, and that dock is older than I am. The water was glass, and the mountains leaned in to admire themselves. There's a nail my grandfather sunk crooked on the third plank from the end, and I've never straightened it because perfection doesn't tell our story. Persistence does. I thought about my father teaching me to pound nails with the grain, not against it, about the way he'd say, "You can force a thing and break it, or you can learn the direction it wants to go." For 2 years, I tried to force a marriage in the direction of a woman who was already walking away. When I finally let go, the shock wasn't that she left. It was discovering I could still stand. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge is not revenge at all. It's a quiet day where the phone doesn't ring with lawyers and the bank calls to confirm, not to question, and the men on your payroll bring their kids to the company picnic because they trust you'll still be signing checks next year. It's a house that holds only one toothbrush because loneliness is a price you can afford, and dignity is a currency that never devalues. It's a nail left crooked as a memorial to the hands that taught you what matters, and a reminder that some things don't need to be perfect to be permanent. I kept the mug my daughter never made because we never had a daughter, and that's a sentence I don't say out loud often. In a drawer at the lake, I keep a mug from a diner in Kalispell, with a chipped rim that scalds your lip if you forget where the chip is. Every time I pour coffee into it, I think about how pain teaches you memory, and memory teaches you care, and care, if you let it, can make you careful in ways that don't cost you courage. I think about the headline that tried to make me into a cautionary tale, and I wonder how many men nodded reading it, because they'd already decided who I was. It doesn't matter now. People will always write the stories they need to make their mornings easier. I have my own story, and it fits in a dock and a ledger and a set of keys that open gates nobody else gets to unlock. The day the settlement wire cleared, I took the truck north on the 2-lane where the speed limit feels like a suggestion and the wheat runs as far as patience. I parked by the old gate where the gravel turns to dirt and walked down to the shore. The lake didn't know what I'd lost or what I'd won. It knew how to hold mountains and return clouds whole when they leaned in. That's enough. I don't know if I'll marry again. The age when you add a second name to a stone is past for me, I think. But I know this. I built a life with my hands and my head, and when someone tried to take it with paper and deceit, I didn't throw punches. I opened drawers I'd prepared in calmer weather and let the work I'd already done do the protecting. That's the lesson I can offer. Build when you don't have to. Guard what you'd hate to lose. And when the storm comes, as it always does, stand where the pilings go deepest and let the wind spend itself. I'm not a victim, and I'm not a hero. I'm a builder. I stack what I can carry, brace what I can't, and try to leave something that holds when I'm gone. If this is a confession, it's only this. I should have listened earlier to the soft parts of my life when they told me something was wrong. I should have asked harder questions. But I don't regret the years I gave. They taught me where not to spend the next ones. Tonight I'll lock the shop, drive out where the pavement stops, and sit on a dock a boy made into a man. The water will do what it always does. It will take the shape of the shore that holds it, and glitter like it's brand new.